Joining us now to talk about it, MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai, Director of Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Kori Schake. She's also a former official at the Defense and State Departments, and retired four-star general and MS Now military analyst General Barry McCaffrey, also with a senior fellow for Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, Stephen Cook. Stephen, Trump has criticized the idea of sunsets from the JCPOA, giving a time frame by which Iran could potentially restart its nuclear activity. Now there's new reporting that the U.S. is arguing for this 20-year suspension of Iran's nuclear program, Iran countering with about 3 years. Why would the U.S. at this point allow Iran any latitude on this topic? Doesn't that leave the nuclear program intact or operational in a way that simply crosses Trump's red line?
Yeah, I think everybody has a right here to be confused about exactly what's going on. First, last summer, the president declared that the Iran nuclear program had been totally obliterated. Now, suddenly, when the issue is actually the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the president is floating the idea of a nuclear agreement that would put a pause on Iran's nuclear activity for 20 years. Presumably, there would be a sunset in that as well. As you suggested, the administration has made a big deal of also including Iran's support for proxies in its ballistic missile program in this. But this is why these two sides are so far apart. The Iranians are in no mood to give away anything to the United States as long as they have a potential stranglehold over the global economy by at least partial control over the Strait of Hormuz. So this strikes me as something the president needs a win, and the nuclear program is something that the Iranians are at least willing to talk about.
Could the Trump administration claim that this is sort of a stopgap measure, the sunset clause of 20 years is a play for time in hopes that the Iranian regime will eventually collapse? And is there any indication that we're any closer to that?
Well, I'm smiling because that was a central hunch at the heart of the JCPOA that the United States left in 2018. The Obama people would never admit it, but I think it was clear that they believed by the time that the restrictions on Iran's nuclear program, Iran would be a different place. Those sunsets were 12 and 15 years. So here we are, the possibility of the president repeating this same hunch, which had really no foundation in reality, but extending the timeline anywhere from 8 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's a thought that the regime is substantially more weakened than it was back in 2015. Inzamam, some ships have been able to get through the Strait of Hormuz despite this blockade. Are we essentially now in a holding pattern while these talks continue?
I think that's probably a fair way to put it, Ariel, but the confusion pretty much continues on the Strait of Hormuz because there are conflicting reports ever since this U.S. blockade was implemented over 24 hours ago now. Initially, remember, President Trump said that he would put a complete blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Then he kind of backed down and said, well, it would just be around the Iranian ports, those vessels going in and out of there along the Iranian coastline. He also had spoken about ships that would be paying toll fees to Iran to pass through, that the U.S. Navy would also stop them. But I say conflicting reports because this evening CENTCOM have put out a statement essentially saying that more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines and airmen, along with over a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft, are executing the mission to blockade ships entering and departing Iranian ports. They said that in the first 24 hours, no ships have made it past the U.S. blockade, and they've said that 6 merchant vessels complied with direction from U.S. forces to turn around to re-enter an Iranian port on the Gulf of Oman. And then, on the other hand, you've got shipping traffic data, which actually suggests that there were at least 4 Iranian ships, including 2 that visited Iranian ports that crossed through the Strait of Hormuz today. And there were also another 3 ships that passed through as well. And I think importantly, and this is a crucial note, one of those was actually a Chinese vessel that managed to pass through untouched by the US Navy in the Strait of Hormuz, the dozens of vessels that are there to essentially carry out this blockade. And China's foreign ministry had said that they condemn the blockade of Iranian ports as dangerous and irresponsible. Just quickly on the technicalities of all of this, Ariel, the US technically isn't blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Instead, it's kind of aiming to blockade Iran's Gulf ports by operating all those Navy vessels in the Gulf of Oman and in the Indian Ocean as well, rather than actually risking sending those vessels near to the Iranian coast. Because if they do get near there, then Iran's still got a huge stockpile of missiles and drones that it could target towards US vessels. It's also still got some fast boats as well that could be deployed in the Strait of Hormuz to head towards these huge US Navy vessels. So right now it seems that the US is staying back away from the Iranian coastline. And so as a result of that, it seems that some ships are being able to pass through.
So I would love, General, if you would react to what Inzamam is just referring to. What does it take for the U.S. military to secure the Strait of Hormuz, to escort ships? What kind of military undertaking is that, and how dangerous would it be?
Well, I think there's some very respected voices in national security saying the blockade's a good idea. I'm not one of them. For the U.S. Navy to go into the Persian Gulf and try and directly enforce a blockade, or even on their ocean-facing ports, puts them in a bad position for naval warfare. Look, we got to back off this whole issue and say it's encouraging signs of progress that both sides, both the U.S. and Iran, basically want to not end the two-week truce. The Iranians have been smashed flat. Their production capabilities, much of their conventional military power, a lot of their leadership, the hold of the IRGC on Iran has been weakened. They're in terrible shape. Their economy's collapsing. They don't have enough water. It's a desperate situation. On the U.S. side, continuing the war is not a good idea, not just politically, but it also puts us in a position without allies, with diminished capability to affect the remnants of Iranian power, and with the global economy in a chokehold by the Iranians. So we ought to be hopeful that in the coming 30 to 90 days there's some extension of the ceasefire and maybe progress toward a stable peace.
Corey, it begs the question, how important is it who is sitting at the negotiating table? Why, in your view, is the White House having J.D. Vance at the forefront of these talks and not Marco Rubio? It seems Witkoff and Kushner have sort of been demoted in this case. Is that sending a message to Trump's more skeptical anti-war base?
I wouldn't presume to judge why the Trump administration's making those kinds of choices, but it doesn't bode well for Vice President Vance, given the inflexibility of terms he proposed in the first round of negotiations and the weakening of Trump's international position after the Hungarian elections, where they clearly attempted to put a big thumb on the scale in support of Viktor Orban, and it backfired. I think what we are seeing in the war with Iran is a fundamental mismatch of military excellence, tactical excellence that is unattached to achieving the strategic objectives, because the administration is poorly defining its objectives and pinballing all over the place. That will make Vice President Vance's negotiations all the more difficult to achieve a successful outcome.
And Inzamam, one of the key variables here is there's another front in Lebanon where Hezbollah is working to subvert the direct talks that could happen as early as today between Israel and the Lebanese government. You spoke to Israel's ambassador to the UAE about this. What did he say?
Yeah, and this is important because you've got to remember, Israel and Lebanon haven't been in the room together in decades. And so these were pretty historic talks that took place in Washington today. They are over now, and they seem to have had pretty positive discussions. But remember, this is Israel's war on Hezbollah as well, directly, a proxy of Iran, as they put it. And I think, the fighting that has happened over the last 6 weeks from Israel directly into Lebanon has hurt many everyday Lebanese people. We know that more than 1 million people have had to leave that country. Thousands have been injured, with many, many hundreds killed as well as a result of the fighting. And today I did speak to the Israeli ambassador to the UAE, the first time he's spoken since this conflict began. And I specifically put to him about the idea of Israel targeting Lebanon on the day that this 2-week, albeit fragile, ceasefire started.
Why did Israel still target Lebanon in the first few hours of a ceasefire?
First, the ceasefire didn't contain Lebanon. Lebanon is another region. It's another conflict.
But Pakistan said it did. The mediators said it did.
But Pakistan, what? They're commanding now what is in the conflict and what's outside.
They were the mediators. They were there.
The mediators, that the minister, the Sue Secretary of Foreign Affairs said we have to eliminate Israel. This is a fair player. Just listen to this. The Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran.
Bit of a fiery exchange with the Israeli ambassador to the UAE. But you've got to remember, whilst these talks were going on in Washington between Israel and Lebanon, well, Israel was still carrying out their attacks into Lebanon. They say targeting Hezbollah strongholds in South Lebanon because they believe that Hezbollah has been firing into north of Israel. But I think, look, there is a real issue here, is that you've got Lebanese people at the very heart of this conflict who have been struck as a result of these Israeli strikes, hospitals, schools as well. And we're seeing huge damage right across Lebanon. But this is all going on whilst this ceasefire is still at play. So if we do see talks later this week, which the president is suggesting, the Pakistanis also suggesting, then this idea of Lebanon still being involved in this conflict from attacks from Israel has to be very high up on the agenda. Ariel.